and welcome back to yet another episode of On the Grid Podcast. We're on episode 15 of season 3. Wow, we just keep on racking the numbers. I don't know how we've got here. It feels like we're on about episode 6 or 7, but episode 15 for sure today. We are reviewing the Monaco Grand Prix, the dry/wet/chaotic Monaco Grand Prix, which saw Max Verstappen inevitably get the victory by a country mile. I'm your host, Adrian, joined again, as usual, by my co-host, Ethan Evans. Ethan, how are you? You're probably the happier of the two fans from our perspectives. Ferrari performance wasn't brilliant on the Sunday. Mercedes capitalised on Ferrari's mistakes, and you're probably the happier of the two, I'd say.
Yeah, definitely happier. A little bit disappointed that one of the drivers couldn't get a podium, but we'll get onto that. Yeah, but happier of the two of us, so definitely.
Let's get straight into things. Basically, what we're going to do in this episode, as qualifying is the bulk of Monaco, we're going to do a qualifying report review, and then we're just going to go straight into our driver ratings and summarising the driver performances over the weekend before we look and reflect on our predictions that we made last weekend preview Spain. So to be looking at the bottom 5, Sergio Perez, Guan Yu Zhou, Nico Hulkenberg, Kevin Magnussen and Logan Sargent in 16th. Let's begin with Sergio Perez, the main talking point of that Q1 session. Way too hot into turn 1. What on earth was he thinking?
Oh, well, it's hard to say, really, isn't it? He just carried way too much speed into that corner. They said it on comms at the time. He was going so quick. There was no chance he was getting around that corner. Really confusing one. On a weekend, he needed to perform. He needed to get a good result to keep his championship hopes alive. And he really did not have a good weekend at all.
One positive to come out of it, though, that Red Bull machinery was lifted up and the whole wide world could see the bottom of that Red Bull car. Ethan, does it give you some flashbacks of that dominance of Mercedes? When in comparison of the two cars, they look very similar on the underneath.
Yeah, well, I think Ted Kravitz said afterwards, he said, because Hamilton's car got lifted up after practice in P3 earlier that day. He said the Mercedes compared to the Red Bull looked prehistoric. It's just like so much has been made about Red Bull and how their innovation and how they're so much quicker than the rest of the field, but it doesn't even compare to Mercedes domination. I wouldn't be surprised to see Red Bull go 23, get 23 wins this season, or what's going to be now 21 wins, because we had China and now Imola's been cancelled. So 21 wins could easily be feasible for Red Bull this year. And that was nowhere near Mercedes domination, maybe apart from 2014, 2015. But the rest of that time period, Ferrari got their wins, Red Bull got their wins as well. If this Red Bull domination continues, this will be unprecedented. Because if you think about it, since the summer break last year, there's only been one race where Red Bull hasn't won, which was George Russell in Brazil. Every other race has either been Max Verstappen predominantly or Sergio Perez.
Continuing on our theme of Q1, Guan Yu Zhou obviously qualified 19th, and then the two Haas's came in 17th and 18th with Kevin Magnussen and Nico Hulkenberg. Touching upon the American-based team here, do you think that Haas are slowly becoming the new McLaren? We saw the good performance of McLaren this weekend. Do you think that Haas are getting a bit unlucky here and maybe finding themselves in a bit of struggle town?
Not sure if you can say unlucky. They've got a very solid drive pairing. Magnussen and Hulkenberg are two good drivers. So, and we've seen before, when the car is working, they're able to push in and around the points. Nico Hulkenberg got very good points to Australia. I think Magnussen finished 9th in Jeddah. So when that car is working, it works, but it just seems to lack a little bit of pace. Maybe especially in the high downforce tracks such as Monaco. So maybe for Spain, their luck may improve slightly with those long straights. But it's going to be difficult for Haas this season, especially on tracks such as Monaco, even though that is an extreme example.
Capping off Q1, we had Logan Sargent eliminated. Do you think the rookie is struggling somewhat? Monaco, he has been around this circuit in feeder series in F2 and F3, but do you think that yet again it's more of a learning curve for the rookie driver where he's just learning the track with every single lap he gets under his belt, especially with a circuit where it's unforgivable, like Monaco clashing into the walls potentially.
Possibly. But then again, there's only one race where he's qualified higher than he did in Monaco. So you could look at it either way. I think he's got a lot of development to do if he's to stay in Formula One. However, this was one of his better showings, I think. The race may be a different picture, but in qualifying, I think he performed well, which, he was less than a tenth off of making it through to Q2, which I think would have been at Albon's expense. I think Albon finished 15th in Q1. So, if he finds an extra tenth somewhere, then he knocks his teammate out, his much more experienced teammate out in Q1. So it's difficult. It's these fine margins, isn't it? But I think this was a better qualifying session from Sargent.
Yeah, most definitely. I definitely agree with you on a better qualifying for Logan Sargent, but once again, he's just unable to find that consistency and that much needed 10th and a bit to get himself into Q2. You mentioned Alex Albon there. In Q1, Alex Albon actually finished third in Q1 with Yuki Tsunoda in second. I was going to touch upon the top three because the top three, yes, the top three consisted of Max Verstappen, Yuki Tsunoda, and Alex Albon. Alex Albon.
My apologies then.
Alex Albon at one point in Q1 went quickest. As the track was ramping up, he went quickest before Yuki Tsunoda eclipsed his time by about half a tenth, and then Max Verstappen eclipsed his time by 3/10. What did you think of the track ramping up?
It was Nick.
Yeah, it was Nick De Vries. Yeah, but yeah,
it was De Vries and Bottas.
Yeah. What did you think of the track evolution in Q1? Because we saw so many changes at the top. Like I said, Alex Albon was up there at the top. Yuki Tsunoda at one point topped the charts until Max Verstappen inevitably came to steal the show once again. What did you make of just the track evolution throughout qualifying? Because it just kept on ramping up, and usually you're expecting a hot and tasty qualifying session regardless at Monaco. And I think all three sessions kind of delivered that.
Yeah, definitely. It's the most important qualifying session of the year, Monaco. So, but the track evolution was something I've not seen before. The rate at which it was increasing and improving, it was unbelievable. Usually you'd see drivers go out for sort of 4, 5, 6 laps at Monaco and do many runs and then pit at the end for a fresh set and do one last lap. But drivers weren't able to do more than 2 laps really, and without a significant drop off. So the track was gripping in a lot. There was a lot of rubber being put down every few minutes, and then the tyres as well really played their part as well by having such a significant drop off between runs.
On to Q2, with bottom 5 consisting of Oscar Piastri, Nick De Vries, Alex Albon, Lance Stroll, and Valtteri Bottas. Bottas once again unable to kind of get himself into the Q3 shootout, which is kind of a shame. We've been wanting some more consistency from VB, but he got himself into Q2, which I don't think he can complain about. It's better than a Q1 elimination and out of qualifying straight away. But I think the main talking point here, Lance Stroll once again, dire 14th, missed the weighbridge and didn't get a penalty. Where in many of occasions previously, when drivers have missed the weighbridge, they've been given some sort of penalty. What are your thoughts and opinions on that? Because I mean, I heard on comms, obviously they were allowed to, they're not allowed to touch his car per se, put it on the jacks, etc. But they can obviously call the brakes and stuff with what they've got. But what are your thoughts and opinions on Lance Stroll? Qualifying, not brilliant, and then that incident.
Yeah, it's very strange. So first of all, second race in a row he hasn't got through to Q3. 18th at Miami, 14th here at Monaco. It's just not good enough in what is arguably the second quickest car. You look at what Fernando Alonso's doing. You almost put it on pole, and then Lance Stroll can't even get into Q3. It's shocking, really. In terms of that weighbridge incident, it's strange. Like, even if it's not a grid penalty, even if it's just a fine, there's got to be some sort of punishment for that, because they say that you can't alter the car, even though they put it on the jacks and they put the fans on and attach that. There's got to be a line. So where is that line? There's no the FIA need to really clarify this, or maybe they can do a retrospective punishment, which will be sort of a fine. We've seen fines given out for similar incidents in the past, but it's really baffling how they said they were investigating it during qualifying, and then we just heard nothing else about it. The FIA, I don't think the FIA even put out a statement with regards to what happened there. So, I think if you're Lance Stroll, you got to think, well, you got away with one there, but yeah, I don't know what all that was about.
Driver ran well in Q1. Alex Albon in 13th. What did you make of Alex Albon's qualifying? Obviously finishing third in Q1 and then unable to get it into Q3. I wouldn't be too disheartened if I was Alex Albon. It's still a relatively good performance in a Williams that's been okay-ish. It's been relatively okay, and especially with the quality of Albon, I think he did relatively well. Got it as far as he possibly could, I think.
Yeah, as always, Albon really extracts the maximum out of that car. When you associate that Williams with the high speed track, sort of your Monza, Jeddah is where he got. He had a good performance this year. So the fact he's able to put it into Q2 and 13th at Monaco, which is the opposite of Monza, it is such a downforce dependent track, is a really good effort. The race didn't pan out for him, but I think he done as much as he could in qualifying. I think he was only a couple of tenths off of making it through to Q3. There wasn't much to split the five that got eliminated in Q2. But yeah, for Alex Albon, he continues to really extract as much performance as he can out of that Williams. And as he said, in Q1, he finished in the top three. So it's not bad going. There's definitely positives to take.
Running off Q2, we had the remaining two rookies of Oscar Piastri and Nick De Vries. I think this weekend was a better weekend for Nick De Vries and Oscar Piastri as well. Obviously, Nick under a bit of pressure from his team after poor performances so far this season, being dominated by his teammate, may I point out, Yuki Tsunoda. But I think the two drivers, obviously, Oscar Piastri with Lando Norris at McLaren and Nick De Vries with Yuki Tsunoda at AlphaTauri. Obviously, their teammates qualified for Q3. Those two missed out narrowly. But I think it's another positive step in the direction of the two rookies. Obviously, they're still gaining knowledge in F1. Obviously, Nick De Vries only competed last season at Monza for Alex Albon at Williams. And obviously, Oscar Piastri was at Alpine in a reserve driver's role. But I think the two have kind of picked it up and kind of stepped up when it's needed at Monaco, especially with a circuit, with the nature of a circuit being so punishing.
Yeah, I think it was arguably De Vries' best weekend of the season so far. Qualified 12th. As we said, there wasn't too much to split all of the cars through Q2. But this is really the performance you'd expect. Obviously, Yuki Tsunoda is in his third season now, been at the team the entire time. His experience under his belt, has raced against a fantastic driver in Pierre Gasly, who I'm sure he's absorbed a lot of information from and how to really maximize the performance in the car. And then he's taken into this leadership role, and now he's had a fantastic season. He's been one of the most consistent drivers this season, as we said in previous episodes. So for performance gaps, for Tsunoda to get into Q3 and for De Vries to be in and around the mix, it's a better performance. Obviously, he's still going to have a few performances this season where he does beat Tsunoda, which seems to be a tricky task at the minute, but it's a step in the right direction. And in terms of Piastri, I've been quite impressed with Piastri this season. He's been a lot closer to Norris than I thought he would have been, and maybe making a lot of the talk surrounding him last season with all that fiasco about the Alpine drama, maybe making it a bit more worth it, which was one of the biggest talking points coming into this season. I think from those two rookies, it was a good performance and a step in the right direction, but it's up to them to see if they can continue this.
McLaren on to Q3. McLaren, absolutely stellar job to get Lando Norris's car repaired. Obviously, he couldn't qualify higher than 10th. But I think it's, like you say, Oscar Piastri and Nick De Vries. I think for Norris, it was another step in the right direction. A new livery for McLaren, and I think the livery curse was not anywhere to be seen. I think they were clear of a livery curse, one-off livery curse, and they performed very well. Norris obviously qualifying 10th. Moving on to Yuki Tsunoda in P9. He was a couple of a 10th and a bit up on Lando Norris in Q3. And once again, I think leading the light in AlphaTauri. I think he did a stellar job to get himself in the Q3 shootout. And then in 8th is Mercedes boy George Russell. Not the easiest of qualifying sessions for George Russell, especially with his consistency in qualifying, Mr. Saturday as we know him. But just this time around, it just wasn't meant to be. I think he just found it difficult around Monaco for some reason.
Yeah, I'll talk about Russell first. He struggled a lot in practice. He was complaining about the car, and there was no grip or anything like that. Comfortably beaten by Hamilton in all 3 practice sessions, and then it seemed to flip in qualifying, where Hamilton was the one in trouble. Russell still didn't have the best pace, scraped through a couple of the sessions, but Hamilton was the one that was in real danger, especially in Q1. I think it was even put in a good lap right at the end. So yeah, it's a difficult performance. Obviously, Hamilton hooked up that lap in Q3, and Russell was a couple of tenths off. But it's going to be tricky for Mercedes until they actually bed in these new updates and understand them a little bit more, which Monaco is a very difficult track to bring new upgrades to. You don't often see that, and for good reason, because you cannot get the best data from it. But yeah, I think it's going to be interesting to see how they progress over the next 3 or 4 races and what other upgrades they can bring, and whether that can elevate them further. But Yuki Tsunoda, as he said, he's doing a stellar job in that AlphaTauri, qualifying 9th and really maximising the performance out of it, because as we said, as we usually have the 4 teams at the front, this weekend it was 5 teams. So realistically, any points for those midfield cars or any getting into the top 10 is a good job. And then Lando Norris, a fantastic job by the mechanics. That's a big repair job. It's like a 20-minute repair job, and they done it in half the time. Completely wrecked the front suspension. I'm surprised he actually got to run again, because he didn't make it back to the pits, did he? Or did he make it back to the pits? I thought he crashed on track. So I was a little bit confused when I saw him.
He made it back to the pits after.
Oh, did he?
At the conclusion of Q2, I believe.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was going to say I can't think of how he managed to run if the car had to be recovered. But yeah, I got to say with that livery, although it is a nice livery, I did get them confused with the AlphaTauri on multiple occasions, with the black and white and then the bright rear wing. I got that and the AlphaTauri confused a number of times. But yeah, great job from Tsunoda and Norris, and then Mercedes could do with a little bit of refinement on their upgrades.
Moving on to Pierre Gasly, who finished in P7. Obviously, he wasn't the lone Alpine in Q3, as we know. Lewis Hamilton finished 6th, and then the top 5 was split by just shy of 3 tenths. Carlos Sainz in 5th, Esteban Ocon in a fantastic 4th. For him, Charles Leclerc in 3rd, a 10th behind, just I believe 200ths behind Fernando Alonso in P2, and then Max Verstappen inevitably getting pole position at the death, may I add, to qualify in P1. Let's start with Max, and then we'll kind of look through the top 5 as we go along. I mean, what he needed to do. In sector 3, he kind of delivered it. He was 2 tenths down, and he made an enormous amount of time in the final sector. How is that possible? It's the shortest sector on the racetrack. How has he managed to claw 3 tenths in the final sector? How? This Red Bull car is just an alien.
Yeah, I watched a side-by-side comparison of Alonso and Verstappen's laps. I think Alonso was 2 tenths up at the end of sector 2. The amount of time Verstappen gained through Rascasse alone, the penultimate corner, is a joke. He made up and some the time he needed. So he gained sort of quarter of a second, 3/10 in that one corner alone. The amount of speed he could carry through that corner was unbelievable. Carried it through the final corner, and that really made the difference. And then the Red Bull, like a rocket ship, was off, and there was no chance for Alonso. But you talk about right at the death. The last lap in the last sector, and it was the penultimate corner where he made up all his time that he needed to do. That is a world champion's performance from Max Verstappen, a fantastic qualifying lap when he needed it as well, when everybody was thinking this could be the race that Red Bull don't win this season if they was going to choose one. Alonso and Leclerc on their part, they put in a couple of fantastic laps. And not to forget, the Verstappen was fifth before he put in that final lap. He was behind Ocon and Sainz as well. So if he doesn't get that final sector right, as it's so easy to do, as he's done before in 2018 when he crashed at the swimming pool chicane, if he doesn't get that right, he's done. He's starting in fifth place, and it's a completely different race. You probably think that Fernando Alonso goes on to win by a good half minute. He came in clutch right at the end, got that lap in, and from there on, managed to secure the win.
Let's not forget the Lion's performance from Fernando Alonso. He could have been on pole position for what seems to be like forever, missing out by 8/100ths of a second to Max Verstappen. Charles Leclerc in third, of course. And here's a talking point. Do you think that Charles Leclerc's through-place grid drop was fair? I mean, even in the driver briefings, when they went up to the FIA, both drivers gave their accounts of the situation. And even FIA stated that Leclerc could have gone nowhere. Care to explain how impeding could have been avoided when Leclerc could have gone nowhere? Because I simply do not understand that.
I do think it was fair, to be fair. If you watch Norris's onboard, he's clearly impeded by Leclerc. But I put that blame down to the team more than to Leclerc. Ferrari needs to be in his ear. He went out first on the final runners to get that clean track, to be able to put in a clean lap. And then all he had to do was negotiate the in lap, and then he would have been third place, or as he would have thought at the time, he may have been on pole. I think it was 0.106 of a second separating the top three, separating Leclerc from the pole position. Ferrari need to be in his ear saying, you've got a car behind you, stop right after, I can't remember the corner before where Sergio Perez crashed last year, before that tunnel section. You need to stop right. You need to let Norris through, and then you can go on your way. There's no pressure. You're not trying to go and get around again to put in a final lap attempt. There's no reason why Ferrari shouldn't be in his ear telling him the distance between him and the car behind. So I think Ferrari really needs to take the blame for that. But yeah, I do think it's fair watching Norris's onboard.
The last talking point of Q3, I think we briefly mentioned Esteban Ocon P4, which turned out to be P3 on the grid due to Leclerc's penalty. I mean, the man just delivers once again. Last season, I believe, I don't know what we were calling him, but I think we were calling him a qualifying merchant, if I remember correctly, from last season, the season before. Qualifying merchant has come back once again to qualify third in Monaco and keep that third place to finish on the podium, which we'll talk about later on. I mean, when you need to deliver at Monaco, he's delivered just exactly that for Alpine. I mean, Pierre Gasly, and he qualified seventh, but Ocon just blew it away. I mean, he was only 2 tenths away from pole, so he wasn't a long way away. It could have been higher on the field realistically if Verstappen didn't put that lap.
Well, yeah, it was a great performance by Ocon. To put it in P4 when we know how good the top 8 have been really this season, the front 4 cars, to even get sort of 5th or 6th would be brilliant. But he was on provisional pole at one point, so yeah, it was a great performance. But let's not forget, this is a man who took the fight to Fernando Alonso and actually beat him. And is only the second driver to do that in Alonso's entire career. So he's got good pedigree, and now he's starting to show what he can do. But a fantastic performance, but did get a bit of fortune for the race by having that with Leclerc getting that penalty.
Moving on to our drivers review. I don't know why I said driver. There's more than one driver in Formula One. There's 20 to be exact. Only 18 finished the race, with Kevin Magnussen and Lance Stroll retiring before the end of the race. But let's begin with our race winner, Max Verstappen. Probably the perfect weekend for Verstappen. I don't think he could have done anything better. Qualifying P1, finished P1. He was close to 30 seconds clear of Fernando Alonso at the end of a race. Realistically, you're looking at it from a perspective where he realistically could not have done more. It was just a perfect performance. Obviously, the rain came and there was a bit of worrying around the paddock, around the teams, but I think Red Bull handled it relatively well. And he won another race. Perfect weekend, realistically, Verstappen.
Yeah, I agree. I'm not sure if it's 10 out of 10 worthy. I've given him a 9 out of 10. But another fantastic weekend. He really pulled the lap out of the bag, as we said, in qualifying, get on pole. Got a better launch than Alonso, which was important. And made those tyres really last. I think he made the medium tyre last about 50 laps until the interval was required. Sorry, and maintained that gap to Alonso, despite the commentary team at Sky saying that the gap was going down because Verstappen's tyres were fading, and Alonso was had the tyre advantage, even though Verstappen was making his way through a pile of traffic, which included about 6 cars, which infuriated me greatly. But yeah, I've given him a 9 out of 10. I think it was a great performance, but it's always difficult to give, the Red Bull a 10 out of 10 because you don't really know. It's just hard to judge what is a perfect weekend when they're so far clear.
I've given Verstappen a 9.5 out of 10. I think, like you mentioned, I don't think it was 10 out of 10 worthy with this Red Bull car. If he qualified 15th, then finished first in Monaco, I think I would have given him a 20 out of 10, for example. But yeah, I think I only gave him a 9.5 out of 10. And that's a common theme throughout my top 3, to be fair. Fernando Alonso obviously qualified second and finished second. Obviously, apart from that misjudgment where he went onto the mediums and then a lap later went onto the inters. Apart from that misjudgment, I think it was a fantastic weekend for Fernando Alonso. When he just needed it, especially with Sergio Perez unable to get into Q3 and kind of give it a Red Bull 1-2. So I've given Fernando Alonso a 9.5 as well.
Yeah, I gave him a 9 out of 10. This is the third time we've given Alonso a 9 out of 10. I'm saving that 10 out of 10 for when he gets a win. I'm really hoping that'll come this season. But yeah, I think save that 10 out of 10 for when he finally gets that win. But yeah, 9 out of 10 for me. Made that mistake with not pitting for the Inter straight away, but other than that, he raced pretty flawlessly.
And I think the same can be said for Esteban Ocon. I think qualifying P4 for the Alpine team, obviously moving up to P3 after Leclerc's penalty and then finishing in that position. Once again, I think Monaco is a track where you could have easily made a mistake in the wet weather and it could have been out of a race and that podium could have vanished relatively quickly. But once again, like I've given Verstappen and Alonso, I've given Esteban Ocon a 9.5 out of 10.
I can't agree with that. If this isn't a 10 out of 10, I don't know what is. Esteban Ocon in the Alpine, which is at best the 5th quickest car, to qualify 4th, to be bumped up to 3rd, and then to defend 3rd place for the entire race, defend attacks from Sainz, from Hamilton. Got a little bit of fortune with Russell having that mistake, which gave him 3rd place back. But if this isn't a 10 out of 10, I don't know what is.
I mean, like I say, I'm extremely happy to give him a 10 out of 10.
Good.
It's for the top 3. I think all of their races were relatively good. Max Verstappen, obviously, pretty much a perfect weekend. But then again, with that Red Bull car, is it a perfect weekend? It's probably a normal day in the office once again for Red Bull. Fernando Alonso, obviously the 2nd quickest car on the grid. Yeah, again, could be said the same. With him being 28 seconds behind Verstappen. 9.5 out of 10, I think is very good. And then Esteban Ocon. I do agree with you with the Alpine obviously being lesser of a good car than the Red Bull and the Aston Martin. So I'm happy to settle with a 10 out of 10 for Esteban Ocon. I'm extremely happy to do that.
Good. Yeah, just because you have to judge it against as well. You have to judge it against where they expect it to come. If they're the 5th quickest car and they get a podium, then it doesn't matter how they inherit the podium.
Lewis Hamilton and George Russell P4 and P5, capitalizing on the mistakes of Ferrari. I mean, for me, I was quite sad. I mean, it could have been a better weekend for Ferrari. But obviously Mercedes capitalized on Ferrari's lack of strategy. Clowns, may I add, in that garage. I mean, it's a constant theme throughout the last season and a half for Ferrari. So I've given both the Mercedes. You might be. I don't know whether I've gone lenient or whatnot, but I've given both of them a 9. Yeah. I've given both of them a 9, purely on the basis of, especially George Russell qualifying 8th and Lewis Hamilton qualifying 6th. Capitalizing on errors like this are crucial. Mercedes could have ruined their races completely if they didn't do the right thing, and they did the right thing, and the drivers continued on their way to finish 4th and 5th to get very, very good points. I mean, Hamilton could have pushed Ocon, could have got the podium, could have bumped him up to a 9.5 out of 10. But yeah, I've given both of them a 9 out of 10. I think by the face that you made, I think you've probably given them a bit less.
Yeah, I didn't know if I was being a little bit nice, to be honest. I gave Hamilton an 8 out of 10. I thought he had good pace all weekend, but I think maybe he could have put a bit more pressure on Ocon for third. He didn't really cause Ocon too many issues. I know it's hard to overtake at Monaco, but there wasn't really a time where you thought Ocon was really under a lot of pressure. And then I gave George Russell a 7. As we said before, Mercedes, with a great strategy, they pulled their drivers in when they needed to, with the double stack, same lap as Alpine, I believe. For the Inters, and that was a perfect time. And I think Red Bull and Mercedes in particular, their strategy is just a cut above the rest, particularly Ferrari, and that's how they gained so many. They've accumulated more points due to their strategy team. But I gave Russell a mark down because of that mistake he made. I don't think it was his outlet. I think it was the lap after that where he went off the track and then rejoined and obviously had that collision with Perez. He lost 2 places in that when that happened. He was third because he didn't pit. He eked his tyres out, eked the hard tyres out, and then pitted straight onto the hards. So he came out in third ahead of Ocon and Hamilton, but that mistake cost him a podium and he ended up finishing 5th. So that's why I bumped the mark off. It would have been maybe even a 9 if he had got a podium from 8th on the grid as well. But I just couldn't give him that higher mark for finishing 5th. So I'm happy to split the difference.
Clearly, I'm being Mr. Nice Guy today. Just handing out good ratings left, right, and centre. Because moving on to Charles Leclerc, qualifying 3rd, obviously had that 3-place grid drop, start P6, and then finish the race in P6. If it wasn't for that poor strategy call from Ferrari, it could have been a different race. And if Ferrari even told him about Norris, it could have been a completely different race. Once again, it could have been a podium for Ferrari and it could have been so much better. But for him to finish Monaco, where he hasn't in the past, I've given him an 8 out of 10. Yeah. This is
Ferrari. Being nice today.
This is Ferrari tax, I think, in my head. Obviously, he's not finished Monaco before.
He finished last year. He finished 4th last year.
But you're thinking of Charles Leclerc and you're thinking Monaco curse. The 3-place grid penalty, I think, was the Monaco curse hitting him.
Yeah, I was about to say.
But I think realistically, he did as best as he could. I don't think he could have done much better with Ferrari's kind of games that they played. So I've given him an 8.
Yeah, I gave him a 6 to be honest, but I'll meet in the middle for a 7. You know, started 6th, finished 6th. Yeah, he started 6th, he finished 6th. He wasn't able to make any advances, of course, because it's Monaco. He did put Hamilton under pressure. He put Hamilton under more pressure than Hamilton put Sainz under, which I'll give him that. But, you know, it all comes down to that mistake in qualifying. If he's starting in 3rd, he easily gets a podium. And then he can probably put on pressure on Alonso. If, you know, Alonso made that strategy error, he could even finish 2nd. So, yeah, he's missed out big time on a podium. So you have to take that into account as well. But, you know, if you start 6th and finish 6th, I can't really be giving you an 8.
Just clearly looks like I'm being Mr. Nice Guy today. I don't know why. Moving on to Pierre Gasly, qualified 7th, finished 7th. I think it was a steady race for Pierre Gasly. He obviously put Charles Leclerc under a considerable amount of pressure, but couldn't make that pass. I've given him a 7 out of 10. Compared to his teammate Ocon, obviously it wasn't like it's complete polar. Well, not complete polar opposites. They both finished in the points, but Ocon just up there because he got the podium. And obviously capitalised on the three-place grid drop for Leclerc. So I've given Pierre Gasly a 7.
Okay. I gave him an 8 out of 10. I thought he was fantastic. He didn't reach the heights that Ocon did, but that's why Ocon got a 10. So that's why I gave him an 8, because I thought that was fair. To be able to keep up with the Ferraris and the Mercedes around Monaco for the entire race, he done a great job, I thought. Because it was not as if he was just keeping the cars behind him. He was keeping up with the cars in front of him as well. I think Leclerc was in front of him for most of the race, and he was on his gearbox for the majority of the race. So I thought very solid weekend from Gasly. Good points for Alpine, and yeah, that's why I gave him an 8. But we'll have to meet in the middle on that one.
Moving on to Carlos Sainz, he finished 8th, qualified 5th, obviously started 4th. Right, this performance from Sainz just wasn't the one. And I've given him a 4 out of 10. Ferrari's strategy calls weren't brilliant as well. He was screaming on the team radio. Obviously had that hiccup with Ocon, I believe, as well, where he tried to make that move and it was simply just wasn't going to happen. For me, 4 out of 10. I think it was a riddled race for Carlos Sainz.
Yeah, definitely. As you said, he shouldn't have made that move. It was nowhere. It was not on at all. I think the second one, where I think Ocon was a little bit naughty there, he moved a little bit too late for my liking. I gave him a 5. As I said, he didn't have a good race at all. He made the mistake as well. Strategy errors as well. It all culminated, and it wasn't a good race for Carlos Sainz. So finishing 8th was, especially when you're starting 4th. But then again, if he hadn't made that move on Ocon's stick and it had worked, then he's up into 3rd, and he's probably racing off into the distance and easily securing 3rd place. So he went for it, which you have to respect, but it didn't come off on this occasion. Just hoping next time he continues to go for it, because Carlos Sainz is a great driver, but it just wasn't his weekend.
On to the two McLarens who had very, very good performances. Lando Norris in P9, Oscar Piastri in P10. I've given both of them a 7.5 out of 10. A lot of improvement from McLaren. Obviously, I think they needed it this weekend. Which it could have turned out to be a very tricky weekend for them. That they were able to secure some points that they needed, and I gave them both a 7.5 out of 10.
Interesting. I gave Norris an 8 and Piastri a 7. I thought Norris's pace on the intermediates was insane. It was the quickest on track, even quicker than Verstappen. Maybe he was taking it a little bit easy, but still, it's still an impressive feat. He cut the gap. So when he came out of the pits, when he got past Tsunoda, he was 50 seconds behind Sainz. By the end of the race, in about 25 odd laps, he halved that deficit. He was about 25 seconds behind Sainz, which is insane. He's gaining a second a lap on the Ferrari in the McLaren, who we've criticised heavily this season, and rightly so. But I thought it was a great performance from Lando Norris. And as we said, when we round up qualifying, on a race where sort of the top 5 teams were cut above the rest, to get into the points is an impressive feat. And for McLaren to get double points is even better. And that's why he gave him the edge. So Norris an 8 and Piastri a 7.
On to Valtteri Bottas, who finished 11th. Obviously qualifying into Q3, which is another step in the right direction, and obviously being in and around close to the points is another step in the right direction for a driver of Valtteri Bottas's caliber. But I couldn't give him any higher than the two McLarens. I've given him a 7 out of 10.
Yeah, exactly the same. I thought, Bottas started 15th, so he showed that it is possible to overtake around Monaco. Made up 4 places. Had good pace, and I think it was a little bit unlucky. He got held up for so long behind Nick de Vries. If he hadn't, maybe he could have put Piastri under a bit of pressure, maybe got up into the points, but wasn't to be for Bottas. But it's a solid performance. This is again, like we said after Miami, this is the sort of result we expect from Bottas. So a 7 out of 10, solid performance.
On to a driver who realistically probably had his best weekend in Formula One, apart from last season in Monza. Which I'm not going to count because it was last season. Nick De Vries qualified 12th, finished 12th. I think it was. I've given him the same rating as Valtteri Bottas. I've also given him a 7. I think if obviously he got it in the points, could have been a 7.5, 8 out of 10, because I think this was performance that Nick De Vries needed when the pressure is kind of on. The pressure is on his shoulders, and he kind of delivered it at a track where any mistake is punishable. So I've given him a 7 out of 10 also.
Yeah, fair enough. I gave him a 6. Well, as you said, when the pressure's on, well, he was told that he has 3 races to save his Formula One career, and one of them got cancelled. So, coming to Monaco with that amount of pressure on you, it's not an easy feat. He needed the result. He didn't quite have the pace. He did fall back behind McLaren's and his teammate, but he managed to defend. He defended quite well. Eventually, Bottas got through, but he managed to hold on to 12th. So he started 12th, finished 12th, and he beat his teammate as well. So, yeah, it's a good performance from De Vries, and hopefully he can carry this on to Spain next and then into the races to come.
The driver making up the most positions in Monaco is P13 man Guan Yu Zhou, made up 6 places from his start position in P19, finished in P13. I've given him a 7.5 out of 10. Purely on the basis because, as you say, it's tricky to overtake around Monaco. And I think he obviously capitalised on Yuki Tsunoda's fallback and mistakes. And obviously it could have been a bit of a better weekend if his qualifying performance was up to scratch like Bottas did in qualifying into Q2. But yeah, I've given him a 7.5 out of 10. I think it's a spirited performance, and making up the most amount of positions in Monaco, I think, doesn't go unnoticed.
Yeah, fair point. I gave him a 6 initially, but on retrospect, I'll bump that up to a 7. Yeah, he had that contact on lap 1. He had to pit, which may have actually played into his favour because then he had tyres that would last the race. Yeah, as I said, he made up 6 places. I think some of them was through good fortune, but, making up 6 places at Monaco is no easy feat. So he finished 13th, a couple of places behind your teammate who's got vastly more experience. I think is an impressive performance.
On to Alex Albon, who dropped down a place from his qualifying position and finished 14th. I think it could have been a lot better from Albon, especially thinking about his Q1 feat. But it just wasn't meant to be. So I've stuck with a 6.5 out of 10 for Albon. Could have been a lot better, like I said, for him if he continued his run from Q1. But I think with the track ramping up, I don't think it played into his hands, and the race was just kind of sort of lackluster for Albon. So I've given him a 6.5 out of 10.
I'm quite surprised by that. I gave him a 5 out of 10. I thought he struggled, to be honest. This is the sort of race you kind of expect Alex Albon to pop up in P10, get a point for Williams. I'm surprised he struggled as much as he did. I'm not too sure what happened to his race. I'm not sure whether he lost places during the rain, what lap he pitted in comparison to others. But yeah, he finished in 14th. 14th. So not the best performance from Albon. For a driver of his caliber, you do expect better, in my opinion. But yeah, I gave him a 5 out of 10.
On to Yuki Tsunoda next, and what could have been, what should have been, it just unravelled in the race. It's just hard. Obviously, qualifying into Q3, starting 9th, and then the wet weather hits, and the man's just tumbling down the order, just aquaplaning off the track, and ended up finishing in P15 in the end. So purely on the basis of the race, qualifying. Let me put qualifying here, the race here. Let me meet in the middle. I'll give him a 5.
Yeah, I gave him a 6. He had good pace in that first stint as well. He was running well in 9th, keeping the McLarens behind him. He didn't have the pace of the cars in front of him, but that's not really expected. But then when the rain came down, I don't know what happened. I don't know whether he had a problem which mitigated the issues. But he just had no pace at all. He slipped through the order, and I was actually surprised to see a couple of drivers on the start finish straight using DRS because in the rain. I think Piastri used it, I think Bottas used it as well, but I'm not sure what happened there. But seemingly DRS wasn't disabled, which I thought automatically happened when drivers went onto the wet tyres. But yeah, not a great race for Tsunoda. But still, there's positives to take out of it. Dry running, he looked good, qualified well, and yeah, he's still punching above his weight, in my opinion.
Yeah, that is a relatively good talking point. DRS in the wet. I actually didn't notice that until you've just pointed it out. Because there wasn't any notification or anything saying that DRS has been disabled. And
yeah, but I thought that automatically happened when drivers went onto the inters or the wets.
Yeah, it's quite really, isn't it?
Especially because Monaco it's not straight; it's a curved straight, so that's got to be present a safety issue.
It's a weird one. The FIA, they keep on delivering the goods for us here on the Grid Podcast. But just keep them coming. Just keep them coming.
Keep it coming. Keep the talking points coming.
We enjoy it, but it's a strange one. DRS. It should, like you say, it should, as soon as the inters, the wets came out, it should have been DRS disabled. You should be using it, and we saw a couple of drivers using it, and yeah. So
if you remember back to Imola last year, they were on the dries and they still hadn't re-enabled DRS because it presented a safety issue. The track was still a bit greasy, but they hadn't. All the drivers were on dry tyres. They didn't re-enable DRS despite the fact it was mainly dry because of the safety issue. And yet the track was atrocious. You saw how slippery it was. The amount of drivers making mistakes, and they didn't do anything. I'm not sure whether it wasn't as wet in that section of the track and they had more grip, but you would have thought around Monaco as well, especially not having an actual straight, they would have disabled it.
Continuing on our driver's review, Sergio Perez qualified 20th, finished in 16th. Probably one of the toughest weekends for Sergio Perez. Immanageable. Yeah, word and sentence, and yeah. It was just a tough weekend for Sergio, especially with that crash and obviously Monaco's nature where you can't realistically pass. Kind of gain 2 positions from Magnussen and Stroll retiring. So realistically, he's only looking at overtaking 2 drivers, which are Hulkenberg and Sargent on track, who finished behind him in 17th and 18th. So on that basis, I've given Sergio a 4 out of 10. I think he just struggled after qualifying. If he didn't make that mistake, it could have been a whole different world. But we've said that for every single driver that made a mistake in qualifying. So yeah, it's just a tough qualifying session around Monaco. Like we said, it's the most important qualifying session, and Sergio just couldn't do it. Just crumbled. 4 out of 10 from me.
I did have him initially at a 4 out of 10. However, thinking back, the amount of times he crashed into other cars, I gave him a 3 out of 10. I think there was a Haas at one point down into the chicane out of the tunnel section. He just drove into the back of him and then blamed the guy in front, saying he brake chested him when he just drove into the back of him. So yeah, it wasn't a good weekend for Perez. This is why he won't compete for the World Championship, because he doesn't have this sort of consistency that's needed. I think he'll rack up sort of 4, 5, 6 wins this season, but he's not going to compete for the World Championship because Verstappen has that consistency. Even when Verstappen qualified 15th in Jeddah, he still finished second. Verstappen hasn't finished outside the top 2 this season. He's only been beaten by his teammate. So this, it's not really good enough for Perez, especially when he has aspirations to be a world champion. But I think he is resigned to now being seen as the number 2 forever, when this is really an opportunity this season to step up and make a mark. I know, for a 3 out of 10 for me.
A tough weekend for Nico Hulkenberg. Qualified 18th, finished 17th. I mean, I'd probably say it was a better weekend from his perspective than it was for Perez's, with obviously Perez being in the Red Bull. So I've given Hulkenberg 4.5 out of 10. I think it was just a tricky weekend all round for both of the Haasers, and yeah, I think he just made the most of it.
Yeah, I gave him a 5 out of 10. He pitted on lap 1. Remember, he lunged down the inside just before the hairpin section where everybody got all the back markers got congested. Got a 5-second penalty for that, and then got another 10 seconds for not serving the 5-second penalty correctly or not serving it at all. Not sure what more he could have done. I don't think he had the best pace, but yeah, it wasn't a good enough performance from Nico Hülkenberg.
Logan Sargent, I think it was just another tricky weekend. I've given him a 4 out of 10. In the end, he ended up being Williams's guinea pig on the soft tyres. And then it's when you see him going on the soft tyres, you know his race is kind of over. So I've given him a 4 out of 10.
But yeah, I gave him a 4 out of 10 as well. He was on the mediums. I think he pit on lap 1 as well. I might be mistaken there. Then he went on to the hards and he scuffed them up or something. He needed to pit again. So I think it was Williams' way of saying, you need to learn how to look after your tyres, so we're going to stick you on the softs and really screw you over here because you need to learn. So, maybe it will help him in the long run, but, it wasn't the weekend to be. Last of the runners who finished had that crash at the hairpin in the rain conditions and nothing to write home about.
Moving on to the two retirees, Kevin Magnussen and Lance Stroll. I gave K-Mag a 4 out of 10. Obviously, he tried to have a Viking performance on the hard tyres in the wet weather, which was only going to go one way. So yeah, I gave him a 4 out of 10. And then Lance Stroll, I mean, Aston Martin car, you realistically aiming to push for Q3 and he couldn't even deliver that and he just retired. He just made mistake after mistake. He was just crashing left, right and centre. So I gave him a 2 out of 10.
Yeah, I gave K-Mag a 6 out of 10 because I thought, you got to commend his bravery for sticking out on the hard tyres, even if it was a little bit naive. But up until that point, he was running well. He was ahead. He was the lead driver out of the two Haas drivers. I think he was running up around 13th, 14th. So yeah, I thought he was running quite well, and then his pace fell away in wet conditions on slicks. But for Lance Stroll, an awful weekend, and that is quite possibly the only way you can put it. He lost places at the start, starting from 14th. I think he lost 3 or 4 places, and then he tries the worst move in the history of Formula One, trying to go round the outside of the Williams around the hairpin. I think it was Logan Sargent. There is barely enough room for one car to make it through. That is the slowest corner on the calendar in the history of Formula One. That is the slowest corner. The Formula One cars barely have the turning circle to make it around that corner on their own. The fact you're trying to go around the outside of that, it's ridiculous. He got what he deserved. Dirty defending, I think it was on Sergio Perez, where he was weaving, made a couple of movements. I think he may have even got a penalty for that. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if that got picked up by the stewards, but not good enough when your teammate is finishing in second place, fighting for the win. So all in all, a terrible performance, and his luck needs to change pretty instantly, because I think even his father won't be able to save him with how poor he's been over these last 2 races. If they're gonna have the second quickest car and he's not even being able to get it into the points, not even sort of be close to Alonso, just compete for points. But yeah, all in all, a poor weekend, and I gave him a 1 out of 10.
Well. Okay. That rounds off our driver review and ratings. Let's quickly glance over our Monaco predictions that we made. Ethan, why don't you quickly fire me your 2-star predictions? What were they?
Well, they weren't. I didn't have a lot of luck on these. So I had Leclerc's DNF and more than 5 DNFs. I knew rain was coming. I knew rain was forecasted, but yeah, it didn't pan out how I thought it was, even though a lot of drivers crashed. And I'm not sure how some kept going, but no, it didn't work for me this time.
My 2-star predictions were a double Q1 elimination for Williams. I mean, one of them was eliminated, not both, so I'll probably take half a point there. And then both Ferraris in the top 5. Realistically, they could have been running in the top 5. Was it not for that strategy call from Ferrari? So
you're not having half a point for that one.
No, I'm not having half a point for that one. I'll have half a point for the Q1 because one of them got eliminated, but not the other one. So yeah. On to qualifying, I got a stellar 2 out of 5. I think I did relatively well in qualifying. Obviously predicted Verstappen to get pole position, Perez to qualify second, but it was Alonso. Leclerc to qualify third, which he did before that grid drop, so I'm taking it. Ocon qualified fourth, and I predicted Alonso to qualify fourth, and then George Russell, I predicted to qualify fifth, but it was Carlos Sainz instead. So I'll take a good 2 out of 5.
I can do you one better. I got 3 out of 5. I had Verstappen Alonso front row. I'm very happy about that. I said Sergio Perez and Lewis Hamilton on the second row, when it was actually Leclerc qualified third and Ocon qualified fourth, which I'm having because I said Carlos Sainz would qualify fifth, and he did before Leclerc's penalty. So I'm taking that point for Carlos Sainz. I'm very happy about that.
Very, very good. In the race, my fortunes kind of went wayward. I only predicted Verstappen to get the win. I predicted Perez, Alonso, Leclerc, and Sainz to finish second, third, fourth, and fifth. Where in matter of fact, it was Alonso, Ocon, Hamilton, and Russell. I got the two Ferraris mixed with the two Mercedes, and then Ocon came out of nowhere, and then Alonso finished second. So 3 out of 10 for me in the end.
Yeah, I didn't do too much better in the race. I said Alonso to win, tried to go for something different. So Verstappen second, so those two the wrong way around. Perez third, obviously nowhere near it. I did say Hamilton would finish fourth, but I put Carlos Sainz in fifth, not George Russell.
Very good. Now, quickly rounding off the episode with our Spain predictions. Spain this weekend, the final of a triple header, which is kind of a double header because we didn't have Imola. But let's quickly look and put our predictions on the board. So for my 2-star predictions, I've gone with more than 2 retirements in the race. I think there might be some mechanical failures in Spain. It's usually a track where mechanical failures happen. And I've gone with Yuki Tsunoda to finish 11th. I think his 11th curse will strike once again.
Interesting. I've gone for Tsunoda to get into the points, and I went for Bottas to get into Q3.
Very, very good. On to qualifying, I've gone with standard. I've gone with Max Verstappen to get pole position, Sergio Perez in second, Alonso in third, and then the 2 Ferraris of Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz to finish fourth and fifth in qualifying.
Yeah, I've gone the exact same. I've gone Verstappen, Perez, Alonso, Leclerc, Sainz in qualifying.
There you go. There could be some agreement, and we could be having some points on the board, or we could be just completely mistaken.
We're both going to be happy, or we're both going to be miserable after that.
Yes. And then onto the race, I've gone with another Verstappen victory. Sergio Perez to complete a Red Bull 1-2. I've gone with Leclerc jumping Fernando Alonso to finish on the podium in third, Alonso in fourth, and Carlos Sainz in fifth.
I've gone for Verstappen and Perez 1 and 2 again. I've gone for Alonso to get yet another podium. I've gone for Lewis Hamilton to continue his streak, continue his good fortune, which has actually gone under the radar, I think, a little bit this season. And then Charles Leclerc to finish fifth.
That rounds off episode 15 of On The Grid Podcast. Thank you for listening. Thank you for engaging with all of our content on our social medias. We're doing relatively well on the Instagram and the TikTok. We've been hitting some decent reels, some decent numbers. So we're very thankful for all the support on those. We'll be back next week when we review Spain and just have a bit of a break after that, as we've got a week off. But in the meantime, continue supporting us, continue following our social media and whatnot. And thank you for listening to this episode, and see you very, very soon.